This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Warning! The following podcast contains adult language, adult content, weird and unusual stories that all happen to be true. We didn't start this war on safety, but we're going to fight that safety war and we're going to win it. Welcome to Safety Wars. We are trying something a little bit different here. We're going with a slightly different format than my commentary, and we're going to be doing more of these. Today I interview Becker, Durnin. She is my insurance agent, and we're going to be talking specifically about homeowners insurance. This is an ongoing theme this month, September 2021, of Disaster Preparation Month. And part of disaster preparation is to make sure that you have enough insurance. Dawn specializes in homeowners insurance policies, but she covers many different policies, and as you'll see in the conversation that we have, we go all over the place. But when do I not go all over the place? Computer. Okay, hey, we're here with Dawn Becker, who is the Vice President of People First Property and Casualty Insurance, right? One of the largest private insurance companies, privately owned insurance companies in the country. And I think that's accurate, isn't it, Dawn?
That is accurate. We are the third largest United States privately owned insurance agency in the country.
Great. I've known Dawn for about 15 years. Has it been that long? 15, roughly?
Yes. It has.
About 15 years, and for the complete disclosure, she is a friend, a dear friend, and my insurance agent for JCP Technical and Safety Wars. So it was a natural lead-in because Dawn, we recently had the building collapse over in the Surfside Apartments, Champlain, whatever they're called, over in Florida. Champlain Towers. Dawn is a specialist in homeowners associations with their insurance policies. She also specializes in for companies like mine and probably a lot of other companies. But her, I better turn this do not disturb on here. Otherwise,
and Jim, just for the record, I am not the insurance agent on behalf of Champlain Towers. I just want to be clear about that. But I do. I am in that industry of community association insurance or common interest communities, such as your homeowners, townhomes, condominiums, and the like, co-ops.
Right, and I'm not working on that project for the accident investigation, and anything that we mention is probably in the public record already and in the public domain. So Correct. We don't have any specific things, but a lot of the issues that go on with homeowners associations, what I want to talk about is, what do you look for? We're talking about disaster preparation, disaster response this month over at Safety Wars. And I wanted to get into, what do you look for? Your safety, for insurance. What are the pitfalls? If you're a member of a homeowners association, what do you look for? So I'll follow the Jay Allen model here. How exactly did you get into this?
Well, I don't think anybody ever said it's when they're 5 years old, when I grow up, I want to be an insurance agent, right? But lots of us dream of being police officers or firefighters or doctors. And I actually wanted to be a physician, but I wasn't exactly wealthy enough to do so. And I was going along the community college route. And I was also finishing up community college, and I started doing a nursing program there. And while I was...
That's your dog.
Yeah, so I'll start over.
No, you don't have to start over. Let's keep going. We're very organic here.
Okay, so I was in college, and I had also been a volunteer firefighter since I had been 16 years old. I joined a rescue squad that was also a fire department.
That was back in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, northwestern New Jersey.
Back in New Jersey, central Jersey. And I became a firefighter when I turned 18. I went through fire academy. I became an officer in the fire company. I was an interior firefighter. I was also responsible for driving the vehicles and pumping the truck. So I had a pump operator certification as well as an incident command certificate. I had completed all my levels so that I could become an officer within the fire department.
At a very young age there, 18, 19, 20.
Yes. And there was not a lot of women in the fire service at all. But as we know, with the fire industry, one of the most important things is training.
Mm-hmm.
It's also regarding your personal protective equipment or your PPE and how to utilize that. Because before we can save property or a person, we must make sure that we ourselves are safe and that the scene is safe before we enter. So nursing.
So that's called, correct me if I'm wrong, the pyramid of priorities in the fire industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So very similar, with nursing, except as a firefighter, my job is to preserve the property primarily and save lives, not secondary, but first, if that is what happens. But most of the time, it's just putting out a fire. Nobody's typically dying in a fire situation, hopefully. But with the insurance, I was actually working in private practice for an orthopedist. And it was the 90s and times were changing, right? We had computer systems. We were using paper files, but we had that regime of old nurses that just really didn't like computers. They didn't like the whippersnappers like me who came along and said, don't use the typewriter. Let's use the computer. Let's be more organized. And of course, I'm learning a little bit differently than maybe the old regime of nurses.
So that's like the generational difference that we're seeing today.
Yes. And I said, you know what am I going to accomplish here? Where am I going to be? Am I going to run an office and become like the head nurse?
Right.
Am I going to change bed sheets? And, who knows what this nursing career could do for me? And my uncle sat down with me and he was an insurance adjuster for Lumberman's Mutual. And he said, wow, he said, nursing, you're not really crazy about that. You joined the fire department, not sure what you're doing about that. He said, why don't you get into workers' compensation case management? It'll give you the ability to travel, do whatever. And I said, that sounds amazing. And I called up a headhunter.
And this is in New Jersey, workers' comp, which is
correct. And so workers' comp case manager would basically be the nurse that would travel with the injured employee. And they would take notes and work with the doctor. And their goal is really to return that employee to work. How significant are their injuries and what treatments can we arrange? So that sounded really interesting to me. And I said, okay, how do I get that job? And my uncle said, well, you can check with the college, or you can also go to a headhunter and see what's available in the insurance industry. And I called on a Friday and I had a job by Monday because the amount of money that they put on the table was twice the amount that I was making. And it came with benefits and all sorts of great things like a 401k, and I couldn't resist. Well, the better part about it was I wasn't actually in the nursing field. It was the headhunter said, I don't have a position for you as a workers' comp case manager, but I do have a position with an insurance company, and you can start at the bottom and kind of work your way up. And it was for a real estate developer in New Jersey who's very well known. Mm-hmm. And I started from the bottom up and I worked my way through with their insurance program, handling construction bonds, property and casualty, as well as discussing contractual risk transfer. And so it grew from there. And I think really when you look back at my career, risk management is what I do. I am managing the risk or recommending how someone can manage their risk. I do a very specialized type of insurance, and I advise my clients on very specialized types of insurance that require a very sophisticated degree of knowledge and expertise. And oftentimes I encounter people who may be in the insurance field, but they don't understand this industry. And I like to say, similar to a doctor, yes, we all have the MD. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but similar like a doctor. But if you come to me, I'm like the cardiac surgeon, right? I'm going to repair your heart and do heart surgery. But if you had a heart attack, you wouldn't see a podiatrist, right?
Well, you know my mother's story on that. She had an inner ear disturbance and they thought it was her heart and she got a pacemaker. So you go to the doctor, we go to the hospital, she's sick. How come you have a pacemaker? Because she had a severe inner ear infection.
So maybe I gave a bad example there.
Yeah, you know. And then they said, no, Mr. Posel, we're serious. How come your mother has that? Because she had an inner ear infection. She went to a doctor to put some pacemakers, and they put in a pacemaker. You know, it's that's typical with safety wars. We get these crazy stories on everything.
I can imagine. I have crazy stories. That's
Crazy, insane. So, homeowners insurance. Let's say that you're now usually with disaster preparation, we're talking about people who are into bugging out, who are into off the grid type stuff. But that's not typical. I call it a scenario 3 and 4, where you're going to be with basically primitive living or very long-term disasters and surviving. But a lot has to go into before you get there. Right? We talk about food, we talk about water, we talk about PPE, we talk about all this stuff, right? But one of those things that has to go in there is insurance. And it's very common for us, right? In the prepping world, we're living in a homeowners, we're living in an apartment complex. Maybe we're part of a homeowners insurance association. Maybe we're all those things. What are some of the red flags that you look for? I know we've talked at length at some of the crazy stuff. You never wrote confidentiality agreements, to my knowledge, but without mentioning names, obviously, what are some of the crazy things that you need to look for, and everything else with it?
So to start with community associations, there is typically what's called a declaration,
right?
Or that is going to provide essentially how the association, what it's comprised of, and how it's going to be enforced by the board. It gives the duties in the bylaw it's going to explain in the bylaws what authorities the board has to do certain actions, right?
So basically it's a constitution except for the organization, or a charter or something like that. Whatever
you have it 100%. However, local, city and state and federal laws will always trump those within the association. But it's its own city, so it's essentially coming up with its own rules and regulations and how it will be governed.
Right.
And so in there, almost all of them have insurance sections which state what the association is required to insure. That's the basics. And not many declarations are very specific. Some are, but most are general, and they give, property, general liability, directors and officers, sometimes workers' compensation, sometimes umbrella. So we start there. In those governing documents are also the rules. And I have to tell you, people who live in an HOA, they don't read that declaration as much as they need to. And even the board of directors sometimes don't read it.
So like when you're going into a deliberative assembly of some sort, and you try to go by Robert's Rules of Order, but nobody actually reads the Robert's Rules of Order, and then there's confusion.
Well, actually, one of the things that we ask when we are interviewing a board who's looking for insurance is, do you follow Robert's rules? Right. And I will tell you that that's a clear indication when they say, who's Robert?
Yeah.
And why do we have to follow him? Where are we going?
And what I didn't realize was, when what my past life was, and what I did was that those rules get updated, and like every couple, I don't know who updates them, but they get updated.
Yes, and so that's an amendment. So some associations file an amendment. So if you live in a community association, you need to be well versed on what those CC&Rs, those covenants and conditions and restrictions allow or disallow. Most of the times, community associations get into trouble or have lawsuits because somebody is in violation of that governing document, meaning that they're either not funding the association properly, or the association is discriminating against a member or a third party, or they've not obtained proper insurance and they have uninsured losses. And you asked me a great question. You said, so, in like crazy stories and crazy things and preparing and risk and when, how do people prepare? Well, we talk a lot to our community associations, especially those that are located along the coast,
Right.
that they need to have a plan before things happen. They need to know, first of all, what emergency responders will be coming.
Right.
What's their response time? How quick are they going to get there? Where's the access points within a community? The entrance, the egress? Are there gates? Are they electronic? Who has the codes? What type of buildings are in the community? How many stories? Will the ladder truck reach?
Would the demography of the community also be included?
Absolutely. Then we're going to want to know too, where are the hydrants? Are there hydrants? Maybe there's not. The other things are, you have all these people that live in a community. Where are they going to go? Do you have a staging area? Is there an area off site that these people can meet? How are you going to contact people to get a head count? Then it comes to...
Well, here's a question for you real quick, not to cut you off.
No,
but a lot of these homeowners associations, we got into this discussion one other time, right? Are they employees or not? Because if they are employees, then you need an emergency action plan, and you probably need HAZCOM under OSHA and all the other stuff. And if you have over 100 employees, you need vaccinations.
So most states do not include volunteers that serve on a community association. They don't determine them to be employees, but you have to check each state individually to see what their laws are and what their definition of an employee is. With respect to OSHA, most states, they're going to go back to the state OSHA guidelines in connection who is an employee. But for example, I had this question in South Carolina, and South Carolina says that volunteers are not considered employees and they are not considered to be governed by OSHA. However, if you hire a contractor, you may be fined by OSHA or responsible for some of the actions of the contractor if there are some occurrences that can be attributed to be your negligence or you're a party to.
Wow, that's incredible. So yeah, we talk about OSHA compliance, but people don't. I know I had an issue with a homeowners association where I used to live, and I broke out the OSHA rule book. So they got scared all of a sudden, and then we didn't have a problem.
Well, most homeowners ask about OSHA from questions of actually not that they want to hire somebody, but they actually ask it because they want to know if they themselves do the work on the HOA. And a lot of homeowners boards and their volunteers do work around the association. For example, cleanup. It could also be just an inspection, walking around to look at roofs. And so if the volunteers are walking around the premises, there is potential for them to be injured. So workers' compensation can be purchased by community associations, but they have to have a specialized policy that includes an amended endorsement to include coverage for volunteers, because volunteers are typically not covered under workers' comp.
Right. Well, when you consider their exposure, I know I'm familiar. I was a member of a church council, and one of the things that the synod, which was the governing body of the church, was that nobody went on ladders. If there was something to go on, if there was something to be done, no volunteer, no one would go on a ladder. You had to actually hire a contractor. So when would you? Because let's think about it. I don't want the church to spend money, but I have this old ladder laying around my backyard or garage. I'm going to donate it to the church because I don't want to throw it out. And then someone goes on to the ladder and they fall off the ladder. God forbid they get hurt, but they fall off the ladder.
Well, most people don't realize too that ladders have they have a date, that they're only so good for so long. They should be inspected, especially if they're used for industrial purposes or commercial purposes. And I actually have a funny story. So the workers' compensation we provide is extended to volunteers so long as the work that they're doing does not require a permit or a license. So we would think of jobs like that, like roofing, you usually need a permit, electrical work, of course, plumbing. So some of the crazy claims we've had for volunteers are, we've had a volunteer who stood on top of a table to put up some party favorite, balloons and
Right.
streamers, and the table collapsed and they were injured. We've also had a table collapse because people sat on it and someone's fingers were crushed. Now, I have a funny story. I mean, it may not be too funny, but we've also had a workers' compensation claim for an individual who shut the drawer on his nether regions. So he was leaning over his desk and the drawer was open and his front side was stuck in the drawer tray and he shut it, and Jim and the twins were injured.
Wow. Well, that's okay. A couple of weeks ago, we had an episode on where I described the need for having an accident management program because we had a guy who tried to blame his venereal disease on work.
Oh,
so
we haven't had that so far.
Yeah.
But there are claims, more so of discrimination. And
I'm sure if there's first-time listeners here, they're going to want to go back and listen to that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there is claims sometimes that people are in cahoots together, right? The board members
Right.
sometimes can be married. They could be a husband and wife, or they could be having an affair or relationship with another board member, or even their manager.
Well, here's
That doesn't happen too frequently, though.
well, it's the 2020s here. Who knows? Anything goes. Anyway, well, here's some other trivia for you. Okay, the person's decorating, right? They're legally under OSHA. They're now construction workers if they're decorating.
Oh,
And
I know that.
yeah, I know of a charity that was going to set up tents and do their own decorations. These weren't like balloons on the back of chairs. These were like bigger things. And the event meeting planner told them, hey, you're going to become a construction worker at that point. And we're not construction workers. That's
we don't advise. We don't want our clients to do that work. We want them to transfer that risk. And I was talking about risk management. Well, there's some risk that you can transfer to others. So if you can have work performed by a contractor, do so.
Right.
And, the other aspect too is just going back to OSHA. A lot of people ask me all the time, am I going to be concerned if there's OSHA violations, or do I report OSHA violations? Now, yes, I am concerned if there's OSHA violations, because if they come up
Right.
in your history, then the insurance company they most likely will not want to insure the risk. OSHA violations in the insurance business are a big deal. We want to see the report. We want to find out exactly what you did to cause the issue, and how did you remedy the situation, meaning what actions did you take in response to OSHA's fines.
All right, now this is a question for you. And this is actually going to become very, my prediction after I get done with this video, we're going to probably go live on YouTube or Facebook here, or maybe even LinkedIn or Instagram. I don't know. We'll figure that out tonight. So you're an insurance company. Someone gets an OSHA violation. I'm just saying the hypothetical.
Oh, okay.
All right. Are they going to look at a general duty clause violation differently than, let's say, a specific violation of, let's say, the fall protection standard?
It's a good question. No claims are ever mutually exclusive. No fines or penalties are ever mutually exclusive either. So it's going to be dependent upon the situation.
Right.
And it's really going to be to affect what's their past.
Right.
And has anything ever occurred in the past? And what are they doing now? And have they had training? We do ask about training quite frequently. And if you're involved in hazardous materials or environmental remediation, we will certainly ask if there is HAZWOP training. Right.
So getting back to the homeowners association, one of the big red flags, and we're going to review a little bit here, is are you familiar with what their governing documents are?
Yeah.
If the people who are managing this, who are run for election, are not familiar with what the governing documents are, that's a big red flag. That may be something, because now they're putting everybody at risk, or at risk for whatever, right? And one of the things that I think we discussed previously, and tell me if I'm going into forbidden territory here, is that the A lot of time, the homeowners association, a lot of people get on the board because they want to hold costs down. So they say, hey, I'm not going to pay X, Y, and Z for X, Y, and Z policy because so-and-so is upselling me on this stuff and they're just selling me insurance I don't know about. I don't want to, I don't need, this will never happen, like a building collapse sort of thing.
Well, Jim, does anybody ever wake up and say, oh my gosh, what a great day. I'm going to buy insurance today. Does anybody ever do that?
I do, because that means I get to call you. So,
but
no, but seriously,
no, insurance is a big burden for many businesses. And I do want it to be emphasized that a community association, even though it's a not-for-profit, is a business.
Right.
And it is to be managed as if it was a business because it is the assets of the community. So when we
as a close family of mine, a family member of mine says, nonprofit is only a tax status. It's not how you run the place.
Absolutely, 100%, 100%.
Right.
Many people are their agenda is to cut costs, and typically the biggest line item would be the insurance program. No matter if you're a small association or you're a large association, it's always a very big item on the agenda, on the budget. So the first thing people want to do is see how they can minimize the cost. But I'm going to tell you, has anybody really spent less money on insurance every year? No, you may find a less expensive option, but really insurance typically goes up anywhere between 3 to 15% annually. And that's not just because of the rates, but because we're also increasing our values. Community associations that have buildings need to insure their buildings to 100% of value. We're right now during this pandemic experiencing a major shortage in materials and labor. And so now claims that would have been taken care of in 30 days or less may take 6 months to settle because the materials are not available to finish the work. So the boards look at that insurance and say, oh my gosh, we've got to save money. And I'm here as an independent insurance agent to advise the community board on what deficiencies they may have with their insurance program and what they may do in order to have a more comprehensive policy. A lot of our insurances are a la carte. They're not bundled together, so the boards have a choice of what they want to purchase. Our goal is always to be the most competitively priced. And as an independent agent, my prices are always the most competitive. My coverages are also the most comprehensive. And it's pretty simple when you look at what all the coverages are, that really what the board needs to look at is not the price of the insurance, but what and who is administering the insurance for them. Meaning that, are they getting service? Are they getting a knowledgeable expert that can inform them of changes and legislation and OSHA requirements, things like that? Or are they just having an insurance agent that renews the insurance policy every year and never has a discussion? Because one of my biggest pet peeves, and one of the biggest things that upsets me in the insurance world, is a board that looks at me as a quote taker versus a professional and an expert in my field. And they expect me to be like Geico or Progressive, and I'm Flo, and I'm just going to come out with these numbers. But really, I do a very thorough job. We look at financials, we look at the governing documents, we look at claims history, we look at the construction, the year, the age, inspection reports, engineering reports, reserve studies. As an insurance agent, we're looking at everything. We know all the dirty laundry.
Well, I know when we renew our policy here, and I don't think I'm giving any information out that I shouldn't be, is, I know you sit down with me for a long time every year, either you or one of your staff members every year, and we sit down and we talk about this stuff.
Yes. And that's one of the things to me with the board who has a manager, for example, they ask their manager to go out and get quotes from a variety of different insurance agents. But at the end of the day, the manager's not licensed. They're not an insurance professional. The board is not licensed and they're not an insurance professional. So what's your determining factor?
It's going to be that bottom line price.
Right.
And they're not going to, well, the other thing is this, how many insurance companies are out there are going to give you a really hard time with things, with things. We're finding that out with the floods in my community now, where I'm talking to a whole bunch of our neighbors and stuff who have been here for a long time, just outright nightmare scenarios with insurance where they thought they had an insurance. And
that's the biggest thing. I thought I had coverage. I was just on a board meeting right before we got on the call, and the board member said, but we're covered for all that, right? And I said, well, as an agent, I'm never going to say you're covered for all of that. There is no insurance policy that you can purchase that covers everything.
I'm sure that there is, but it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Well, I like to say to people, most of the times when I find deficiencies in their insurance, they're actually paying too much. And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I said, yeah, you bought paper.
Yeah.
Because that's all it was. It would never pay what you thought it would pay for. You purchased a very expensive piece of, a book of paper.
Wow. So that's another one is on your board, who's actually doing the negotiating, who's getting the quotes? Are they qualified to discuss things with the insurance company? Are they authorized? Are they a proxy? And how does that board make their decision on how to make insurance, which more often than not, unfortunately, is, price.
Yes. And so the board's a majority. And I always think to myself, if I have a 5-member board, I've got to get 3 people that understand. My job is to educate the board. I am there to provide alternatives to insurance. And because I'm independent, I'm not held down to one specific insurance company. So I'm going to give them a variety. And when I come to them with a recommendation, it is specific because I've looked already at what's out there and I've made that determination. Insurance companies are not growing. We're not finding that, there's 10 insurance companies opening up their doors tomorrow.
Right.
They're all eating each other. Okay. I tell you what, I'm probably in the next 5 years going to work with somebody that I started working with when I started in the insurance industry over 25 years ago, because it's a small world. We all wind up working for the same company eventually. Don't burn any bridges.
Right. Well, be very careful.
It's a very small world. It really is. We're all sort of well known and we all kind of know each other. It's just with the boards have to look at what is the price of the insurance versus what's the cost of the insurance. So it's one thing that if you pay and there's a certain amount, and we're all hoping that the insurance is going to pay that claim or judgment, pay to defend us, but what if it doesn't?
Right. Interesting. So, with the whole COVID thing, the COVID-19 thing, how has that impacted your end of your world, right?
So pandemic insurance was something that you could potentially buy, but it had a lot of exclusions and you probably have to spend a couple $1 million. I believe the US Open had purchased pandemic insurance and I thought it was about $1.7 million and there was a very large deductible. And that pandemic insurance is more for closing down or special event, meaning that you have an event planned and now something unfortuitous just occurred. So with the pandemic, though, viruses may or may not have been covered on an insurance policy. Now they're completely excluded. Right. Most insurance companies, if not all, have added either a virus exclusion, which states absolutely virus, whether, airborne, bacterial, or viral, it doesn't matter. It's a virus, it's a virus. They've also added in exclusions, which have always been there for mold, but they've also added organic particulate, organic material, also man-made. Right. They've put it all in. There's even exclusions out on insurance policies for SARS and bird flu.
Well, what the kicker is that with the viruses, they were not able to sample them via bioaerosol in a reproducible, validated method until about a year ago.
Oh, so, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
the big concern with liability is, Sorry.
That's okay. They're very excitable.
Yes, one of the kids just went out the door. The biggest thing with the virus was community associations having to shut down their swimming pools or their playgrounds or their gyms. And the reason why is because, number one, they didn't have insurance coverage. There was going to be no defense and no indemnification if a community association opened up their swimming pool and somebody claimed or made allegations that they were injured or that they suffered damage due to the virus and it was the fault of the association, because associations still have they have to protect and maintain, which means you have to protect your members too. You don't want to have a circumstance where you're causing somebody injury, whether it's a disease or a virus or etc. So many associations were fearful if they reopened that they wouldn't have that insurance coverage to pay for those.
I know I did an interview with one of your friends last summer, summer 2020, on specifically that. How do you do a contact trace? Right. And
well, I think we found out you can.
Yeah. And, and you just have to raise the specter of some type of gross negligence of some sort where, okay, well, we weren't taking the precautions and now all of a sudden you're, now you're liable. No,
well, that was a big thing. We talked about budget. So everything that a community association does is through funding. Their funding comes from the monthly or the annual dues that a member pays. There's a special assessment that may come for unanticipated costs, including capital improvements, replacing a roof, something that's uninsurable. So if they don't have earthquake insurance and an earthquake happens, well, guess what? The members are going to be assessed. And so the board, they're indemnified through the governing documents so long as they act in good faith and they're adhering to the business judgment rule. However, there's still things that are not insurable. So you can do all those things and act in good faith, and you can have a monitor at the pool, you can have a cleaning company, but there's always the potential that somebody could become injured. There's been some legislation granted to not-for-profits that they are immune in certain states from litigation from COVID-related injuries and deaths. And that's a great thing. Some boards use waivers, but remember, this is common interest community. So if I have part ownership in the pool, can I really waive my rights? Can a child waive their rights? I mean, these are all legal things, but
and the other thing is
spoken about it.
Right. And the other thing is, if you're a board member, you can be held liable. This is what we're seeing in the Florida situation.
Yes, and you can be held personally liable. And now since Champlain Towers, I think it brings to the forefront how much infighting goes on and how many people don't listen to each other and don't heed professional advice.
Right. And, on the oversight people doing things, are they really qualified?
Are they really
are they credentialed? Are they licensed? Are they experienced? Right. So, for example, in our field, here with a certified safety professional or a CHMM, right? I specialize mostly in environmental and construction type things. I wouldn't even pretend to go into a TV studio and know that safety, even though you could be there are certified safety professionals that manage media and TV studios and things of that nature. It's a very highly specialized thing. So, what's your experience? So.
Well, I don't know if a lot of people really talk to their insurance agents and find out what their experience is because, again, I said, I'm seeing all the dirty laundry. I also see the agents that people are working with, and I wonder, are they really vetting their insurance agents? Because as an independent insurance agent, I can represent those same carriers. So I like to say sometimes, like, you've got the right horse, you just have the wrong jockey.
Right.
So it's important, is the jockey going to help you get to the finish line or not? Are they going to help you accomplish your goals, or is it just going to be a nag?
Right. Wow, we covered a lot of material here.
Yeah, definitely.
Always, by the way, for the listeners, this is how our conversations usually go. So we make it a point not to talk to each other more than
we just
we need
go
to.
on and on.
Because it goes on and on and on. So, how do we find you? if you know someone said, you know what, where do we find People's First?
Well,
how do we find Dawn?
So I am a word of mouth reputation individual. I don't pick up the phone. Number one, I sound like I'm 12. A lot of people think I'm a very tiny little person. I'm 5'10". I'm an Amazon. So when I show up on your front door, it's always, oh, it's not what I expected. So it's really word of mouth. It's people who have worked with me and have gotten a benefit of understanding their insurance program. Because here's the thing, like I said, I'm an independent agent. I can write insurance with the same insurance companies that you're probably already working with your agent. The difference is, what can I advise you on, and how can I educate you so you make better decisions when you're buying?
Right.
And I will, if you do find a better insurance program for you, then God bless, and hopefully we'll do business again in the future.
Great. That's wonderful. So this is Jim Posel for Safety Wars, and we were speaking to Dawn Becker of People First Property and Casualty Services. So if you want to get in contact with her, she's on LinkedIn. She's Google. You can Google her, Dawn Becker, BEC.
Oh, Durnin. You got to add the Durnin in.
Durnin, DURNIN. I always knew you as Dawn Becker until you got married. So
yes, and I'm on Twitter, and I do answer Twitter, and I'm also on, as you mentioned, LinkedIn, and we have a website.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.